who weren't post-punk, who weren't complicated, was Sham 69. And I regard Jimmy as the last of the punks, and strangely, they were destroyed by the NF, which was extremely odd. Did you like Sham 69 at all?
Sometimes I would spend a few days on the road with him, and he would draw the most peculiar crowd. There's no doubt about it, and he didn't know what to do with it.
No, a tragedy. Okay, up the front here. Where's the mic?
It's not for you, Tony. It's to
I know it is. Fine. I'm getting you the mic, dear. Go on.
I'm ignoring you like everybody else does.
Fine. Good man.
77 punk, whatever you want to call it. Was it Manchester and Guests? Did it finish up Manchester and Guests?
What, you mean the whole thing?
As in the Manchester... not just the Manchester bands, the Manchester people, plus bands from outside who were welcomed in, like the Slits, Penetration, the Banshees.
Yeah, I mean, I think it changed very quickly from something that had been written about coming from London and was Bromley and Susie and everything, and they did come here very quickly, and because we instantly responded to it with this extraordinary series of groups, Buzzcocks, Fall, Joy Division, there was John Cooper Clarke, it did seem that we turned it around, like we were the chat show that was inviting these on as our guests. You know, we were the Letterman and the Leno. It was an extraordinary moment, and you know, it's something it's clearly obvious that what happened with those two Sex Pistols shows at the Leicester Free Trade Hall completely, you know, made Manchester everything that it's ever been since, and in the sense that something about its spirit, directly and indirectly, has touched the whole world, although I would never let him know that, obviously, because of what it does to his fucking head. But it is interesting that something has happened culturally, oddly enough, because the Sex Pistols came up and were invited by Howard and Richard and Peter, because, you know, they responded to what was happening there, because it was about ideas and imagination and enthusiasm for the future. It's really odd that it did come out of those two shows, and out of the Anarchy tour, and out of the White Riot tour, and out of the fact that we responded with this breathtaking music, which at the time, really odd actually, but it comes more and more true now that we're 30 years on, that weird thing with Simon Reynolds' book. We all said that Joy Division were the best band in the world, and the Four were the greatest strange band in the world, and Buzzcocks were the greatest pop group in the world. We didn't really think that it was really true. It's only now, 30 years later, you realise, actually, the history has been made, it bloody was true. And it's a kind of weird thing.
You have to remember that the two great powers, the Pistols disbanded in San Francisco, the Clash, who were wonderful, they were undermined. They were a rock band. They were always going to be a rock band sooner or later, and they became a rock band sooner than later and became shite. And it left the Buzzcocks as the one remaining who doing these wonderful punk love songs. So, and also, it's very like Karl Marx created communism for Germany. He was a German. He wrote Das Kapital. He wrote the whole thing for Germany, and he got adapted by a massive fucking rural economy in Russia. And similarly, if this thing came out of Bromley, the natural soil for it was a derelict, post-industrial, shitty, boring. I mean, boredom, and unemployment. I mean, whatever we say about Tony Blair, you know, what happened to unemployment? You know, how bad was that? How awful was life in the mid-70s in Manchester? And for some strange reason, that was why we were able to take it to our heart.
Absolutely, and at the time, I remember thinking that, you know, the line "Badum Badum," sung in many different ways every time, was the greatest line ever for popular music, and the solo in that particular song, Boredom, was the greatest guitar solo in musical history, and it's kind of turning out to be true.
Did you ever see Sweep and Sooty do Boredom? And So It Goes. They were very good. He did it, and his father nearly disowned him, Matthew, for doing it, but he did.
I saw Pinky and Perky do Anarchy in the UK.
Yes.
And I saw Peter Glades do We're Only Making Plans for Nigel. But I've slipped into my Top 100 Channel 4 nonsense hat, so I'll take that off in immediately.
Julie Birchall's, who I've only just met, is incredibly rude about XTC. Do you know that? She's fucking... Oh, is that why?
Yeah,
okay,
Bristol, same town. They're probably brothers. Andy Partridge is probably her brother.
Can I just apologise? I'm going to go in about 3 minutes, and I really do apologise, but obviously we could go on all night and you could go on insulting me. I'm sure, Paul, you don't have to go immediately, but... so one last question, which I'll listen to Paul
Before you go then, what were you expecting in 2002? If your 13-year theory is
I was
correct?
expecting a brand new youth explosion, and I didn't fucking get one. I mean, strangely, we're talking about the way music functions and the rest of it. Right now, I work in black music, and it is as frustrating and as difficult and as fucking nightmarish as working with Joy Division originally and working with the Happy Mondays, in that no one wants to fucking know. But I happen to believe that, at least there's something exciting. British hip-hop has suddenly found its own voice. No one wants to buy it because they used to, people I know, their kids buy American hip-hop. And they didn't used to buy British hip-hop because it was a wank. And now they don't buy British hip-hop because it's too real and scary. So I'm just pissed off. That's my life. What did happen was, in terms of new music, what I expected to happen did happen, that British bands, although he's now insulted with Lost Prophets, Welsh bands absorbed new metal from America, which in 2000, 2001 was the most exciting form, and then re-expressed it with English wit and humour, and I have to say I do like those bands. But the one thing that's lacking is there's no politics with a small p, no culture, there's no T-shirt, there's no look, and the rest of it.
I think because music has gone virtual, it does that thing that's quite dangerous, that it goes straight from the fingers to our ears and it misses going out into the world. And I think what we see upstairs in the exhibition and what we saw in 1976 was that thing that's very, very important, that music, before it hits our ears, and when it leaves the musician, takes a detour out into the world and creates the culture that it leaves behind.
All the bits and pieces that go.
And that paraphernalia ultimately is what is so important, and you realise the music is a soundtrack to that. And we're lacking that now slightly because of what, in one sense, is a wonderful thing, this technological distribution of magic directly to us. But what it does tend to do is take us back to almost a chamber idea of listening to music, and it loses the fact that it actually has a great cultural impact.
If you haven't read Nothing by this man, you haven't read the most important book of the last 50 years.
I'm going to headbutt you and snog you at the same time.
On that note, thank you very much, Paul Morley, Anthony Wilson, for joining us this evening. It's fantastic animated talk. Cheers.